Hello and welcome back to Scholastically Natalie, where we talk about books, writing, reading, D&D, and sometimes other things. Today we are continuing on with what little remains of Bruce Coville's Into the Land of the Unicorns. We are on Chapter 17, Upward. "You must leave this place at once," said Grimmauld. "Why?" asked Kara, who was still shaking with the shock of the message. "Because she knows that you are here." They had returned to Grimauld's writing room. The old dwarf was pacing back and forth in front of the fireplace, chewing his lips. "This is worse than anything I could have imagined," he said. "Beloved has not been heard from for years. I had even dared hope she might finally have died. Now you arrive with this amulet, a hunter hot on your trail, and the ancient enemy tracing your path. I do not like this. I do not like it at all." Kara shifted nervously in her seat, feeling vaguely guilty, as if the entire situation were somehow her fault. She started to say something, then stopped herself. "Why not destroy the amulet?" growled the Dimplethumb. "Be my guest," said Grimmauld. Gesturing toward the fireplace, he nodded to Kara and said, "Throw it in, if you wish." "Won't the queen be angry?" she asked, at the same time wondering what such an action would mean for her own chances of getting home. Grimmauld shrugged. "Probably not. I suggested it merely for the sake of demonstration. If you throw it in, it will not melt. Hammer it, it will not bend. To destroy it would take a magic more powerful than can be found in this cave. Things that cannot be broken are generally a bad idea," said Thomas. Kara shivered. "Where is Beloved now?" she asked. "On Earth? Or here in Luster?" "I do not know," said Grimmauld, "though I dearly hope that she is still in your world. Bad enough that she has some agent in this world, probably one of the hunters, which is even worse, without her being here herself. If she knows where we are, knows to send a message here saying she wants the amulet, isn't it likely that she will have someone in place to steal it as soon as we leave here?" asked Lightfoot. "Absolutely," replied Grimmauld, "which is why you must leave in secret. I will take you to one of the back tunnels. It will let you out in Firethroat's territory." "Yikes!" squealed the Squidgem. "She should not bother you," said Grimmauld. "I have long since made peace with the great lady. In fact, she herself suggested this emergency exit." "What do we do after we leave?" asked Kara. "Make for Summerhaven and the Queen with all the speed that you can manage. I had hoped to summon help, an honor guard to take you and the amulet safely to court. Now you will need to travel as swiftly and secretly as you can. The amulet must not fall into Beloved's hands. If it does—" He shook his head, as if the magnitude of the catastrophe was beyond his power to describe. The trip through the tunnels was longer than Kara had expected, mostly because it had not occurred to her that Grimmauld could have such a lengthy passage underground. They traveled first through a corridor lined with wood, then for a long way through natural rock, crossing underground streams, traversing caves so huge she wasn't sure they would be able to find the other side, and narrow places so small the Dimplethumb could hardly squeeze through them. Finally they left the caverns and entered an earthen tunnel supported by beams. "Man-made," Kara thought to herself, then realized that here on Luster, handmade was the most she could say, and be sure that she had the truth. The Squidgem rode on her shoulder for most of the journey, nervously crooning nonsense syllables in her ear. His fluffy tail curled around her neck felt as friendly and safe as the stuffed animals that lined her bed at home. Home. The thought nearly stopped her in her tracks. She could not think of home without thinking of her grandmother, and she could not think of her grandmother without a pang of fear, wondering what had happened to her in the Tower of St. Christopher's. Though now that she knew who had chased them there, she was even more confused. Aside from the Squidgem's chatter, they travelled in silence. Once or twice Lightfoot made a point of stopping beside her. When she put her hand on his shoulder, he thought to her, "I just wanted to see if you were all right." Eventually they reached a set of 5 earthen steps. The steps led up to a wooden door. The door slanted toward them. The angle was so sharp that when Kara pressed her forehead to the door, its base was still some 5 feet ahead of her, level with her knees. Grimmauld said something to the Dimplethumb. The creature put a paw-like hand on Kara's shoulder to draw her back. Stepping past her, he pressed his shoulder against the door. It opened into twilight, revealing a sky just starting to blossom with stars. Kara now saw that the reason for the door's angle was that it was set in the side of a hill. Once outside, she saw that the door's exterior had been disguised with grass and wildflowers, and rocks that she guessed must somehow have been glued in place, or, she realized, held there by some sort of magic. Grimwold pointed ahead of them and began to speak to Lightfoot, giving the unicorns directions, Kara assumed. The dwarf turned to her. "It was a great pleasure to meet you, Miss Kara," he said with such obvious sincerity that she suddenly felt somehow more at home here. "Not all stories are good. Not all endings are happy. May your story, on which may ride the fate of us all, be both good and happy. Give my regards to the Queen and to your grandmother, if you are lucky enough to see them." "I will," replied Kara, somewhat confused by the combination of gloom and hope in the dwarf's words. Grimwold turned and stepped into the hillside. When he closed the door, it was almost as if he had never been there. The Dimblethumb made some growling noises. Kara put her hand on Lightfoot's shoulder, too late to understand the meaning of the growls, but in time to catch the unicorn's response, which was basically, "as fast as possible." Turning his attention to Kara, he added, "Would you like to ride?" She scrambled onto his back, twining her fingers in the spun silk of his mane, pressing her knees to his sides. No need to urge this steed to speed, or for a bridle to guide him. She merely held on as he sped through the grassland, straight into the domain of the dragon. The Squidgem and the Dimblethumb travelled beside them, the Dimblethumb usually on his hind legs, but occasionally dropping to all fours. Thomas ambled along behind, seeming not to hurry, yet never falling very far back. They were nearing the foothills. A full moon had risen, painting the entire landscape with silver light. Suddenly the Squidgem screeched and leaped onto the Dimblethum's back. "Look-see, look," he cried, pointing moonward. Kara looked up and gasped. Dark against the darkness of the night, Firethroat was flying. She crossed the moon once, and then again, her great and terrifying shape stark against the silver orb. On the second pass, Kara realized that the dragon was getting closer. For a moment she tried to convince herself that it was mere coincidence, but too soon it became obvious that Firethroat was heading straight for them. "Run!" she cried to Lightfoot, forgetting that her spoken words carried no meaning for him. It didn't make any difference. The thought was so strong in her that she didn't need to try to send it to him. It flowed from her in a wash of panic so powerful that he reared back and pawed at the air. Kara slid from his back, landing with a thump on the soft grass. Part of her remembered Lightfoot's warning that to run would only anger the dragon. But with that great, bat-winged form swooping toward them from the darkness, such advice was hard to heed. Scrambling to her feet, she shot off through the grass. Something grabbed her neck. She screamed before she realized it was the Squidgem, who had leapt onto her shoulders and was gibbering with a fear that matched her own. To her astonishment, Lightfoot held his ground. He stood in the moonlight, wind streaming through his mane, staring up at the dragon as if daring her to take him. Kara caught her breath as Firethroat swooped low above the unicorn. The creature was enormous, her head the size of a car, the span of her wings wider than a house. Lightfoot, even the Dimblethumb, suddenly seemed tiny in comparison. Raising her head, the dragon shot a column of fire into the sky. Then she flapped those enormous wings a single time and swooped over Kara. Closing her right claw around the girl, the dragon turned and headed upward. Kara screamed and kicked as she was lifted from the ground, but the talon that had closed around her waist was like a band of iron, smooth, hard, unbreakable. Her stomach lurched as the world fell away beneath her. Her legs dangled uselessly, and with nothing supporting her, she was terrified that she would fall. At the same time, irrationally, she was struggling to escape the dragon's grip, even though success would have sent her tumbling to the ground, increasingly far below. The Squidgem, which still clung to her neck, was screeching in terror. The dragon wheeled, and almost as an afterthought veered toward the ground again and snatched up Lightfoot with her other claw. Then into the air she rose. As Kara watched the land fall away below them, she spotted Thomas and the Dimblethumb, the latter roaring and stretching his fists toward the sky. Slowly they dwindled until they were nothing but specks. The dragon flew on. And that is the end of chapter 17. The next is chapter 18, titled In Firethroat's Cave, where we'll find out if our intrepid heroes will live or become tasty snacks. As always, thank you so very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Scholastically Natalie is out.